The following story is an artistic work of fiction and falsehood. Only a fool would consider it as fact. Chapter 10. Paper Hearts. January 24th, 2007. Hey B, I don't have a whole lot to tell you about today, but I did sort of promise to check in a bit earlier the next time I posted last night, so here I am. Though I almost did prefer last night's thread, as it was free of spamming, short as it may have been. I don't count the loli pictures as spamming, I think. Anyway, last night was mostly uneventful. I showed up, as usual, checked the logs, noted that a couple of comments had been entered on her new origami hobby, all positive, and eventually checked in on her after making sure my other wards were peacefully dreaming of whatever it is people older than I can really fully comprehend within my own head dream of. I found that she was still awake, as usual. We've discussed it, and she admits she's started staying up to spend more time with me. More on that later. And that her bedside table was covered in miniature paper animals. I noted to her that she'd been pretty busy, to which she replied that she'd come to enjoy it after all, and gotten better. She offered one of her latest models, made it just a half hour earlier, in anticipation of my arrival, for inspection, to prove her point. It was as fine a paper crane as I've seen, personally, though I admit that one can really only perfect origami so far. Still, she'd managed even tiny little details, like a creased beak to give it more depth, and folds along the midsection of the wings that were then rotated slightly, giving them the illusion of being in mid-folding, the not-so-paper kind, as it came to rest. I gave her my honest reaction of impressed praise, which she clearly seemed to appreciate, even as normally subdued as her reaction was. I took up the book and studied her other creations, finding that she'd been progressing through it. Not as perfect as her crane yet, but still quite recognizable for what they were meant to be. It took me a double take, but I even noticed that she'd made a tiny origami bear, which was sitting beside her original bear's legs, where it sat on the table beside her lamp. I made a joke that she'd left me behind in the dust, and could do fine without my help, to which she grew a bit upset, and said I'd promised to practice with her. I reassured her that I'd just been joking, and I wouldn't be giving up just yet, then proceeded to make mutant abominations of various sorts with my left hand for the next hour, with her offering the occasional suggestion for how to handle some tricky parts every now and then. I got called away just afterward by a patient that caught the flu after a visit from his family earlier in the week. 'Tis the season, goddammit, hooray. So off I went, of course. Once he'd been taken care of and sent back to sleep a bit more comfortable, another patient across the hall from him had woken up and gotten agitated. I swear, sometimes I think they'd develop some sort of geriatric hive mind, after a while. I eventually managed to calm her up as well, after nearly a half hour's work, and got back to you-know-who's room, only to find that she'd since fallen asleep, a half-finished turtle still resting in her lap. I turned her lamp off, leaving her nightlight on, set her ninja turtle in training on her table, and tucked her in carefully, then let her be, and headed back to my station. No nightmare afterwards, thankfully. So it ended as well as any night could, anyway.
Is this a Nurse-kun thread?
Well, I guess so, as I'm Nurse-kun and I started a thread. I've been doing that again lately. I've been thinking about what she's said a few times before, about how she's admitted to staying up even when she's tired, to see me, presumably because she doesn't feel very interested in most of the people around during the day, particularly her fellow residents. I can't say I blame her, since, well, would any of you really want to live with a bunch of geriatrics, let alone with many of them being senile as well? I know I wouldn't, and I do it for a living, sort of. Plus, the nurses are always busy during the day and early evening shifts, said geriatrics keeping our hands full, to the point where I often barely managed to see her at all during the morning or day shifts while I was double shifting for a while there. She needs attention, and the system isn't really designed to give it to her, particularly since, though getting her to admit it even slightly was tough for me, let alone someone else. She feels uncomfortable around the other patients, particularly since it means she has to be confined to her wheelchair while she's amongst them, which she still hates. So group activities are less than optimal, since most of the attention giving in a facility like this is given to groups of patients at once, rather than one at a time, due to simple resource shortages. Well, anyway, I'm considering looking into volunteering some of my off hours to keep her company during the day when she isn't busy with her rehab or whatnot, as a quasi-family visitor, since they have the right to take their old person out of the home for outside activities and such, even if most of them rarely do, sadly. Of course, my being approved for that status isn't exactly going to be as simple as a rubber stamping, so I'll have to discuss it with her social worker and the head admin first, and expect some deliberations. Still, if it is approved, and I think it might be, it could only help in any future chances with the adoption possibility, unless a meteorite hits her while she's in the park or something, but that's a slim possibility, so it'd be worth it. Just something I'm thinking about today, and was yesterday anyway. That's about it for my rambling storytelling manglings, though I'll be around my apartment for a while yet, and I'll check on the thread. Will not be killing self just yet. Apologies, fine sir.
Woot! Glad to hear from you. So, how's the legal process going?
Still in preliminaries, if that. My cousin dropped me an email on Monday mentioning that he was going to be having lunch with his friend that works in family law next week, so he might have some more advice for me then.
Hate to rehash this, Nurse-kun, but B really needs pictures, desperately. I don't know what it will take, but whatever it is, it must be done.
I'm aware of B's needs, but at this point, I still don't think it'd be a wise course of action. I mean, not just legally or job-wise even, but I think I'd feel bad if I did it. I know this is kind of a GTFO material, but I'd feel guilty if I delivered her likeness into B's clutches. Her description and circumstances is bad enough.
She is being tested by our Lord, may he ninja forever, to see if she is fit. Perhaps this is the prophesied one who will save B from Gaia fags and their ilk.
Well, and I just remembered this incident. She got into a fight with one of the geriatrics a week ago, when she was waiting in the front lobby for her transportation to her rehab, and he wandered in to bother the front desk receptionist about whether his children had arrived yet to visit him. He apparently does this at least twice a day, even when they aren't scheduled or expected, even on his good days. On his bad days, well. And after he'd bugged her for a couple of minutes, with the receptionist telling him they weren't coming, his attention drifted over to her, where she'd been sitting and reading relatively quietly, like she normally does. Apparently, this was not one of his best days, and he approached her and started mumbling something about Japs. Seems he fought in World War II, with her ignoring him at first, and him escalating in volume and intensity as he got closer, which the receptionist noticed, thankfully, and called for security. He was right in front of her by the time they arrived, ranting about the fucking Japs and a bunch of other slurs and propaganda pieces from the time at her, and he started yelling about his buddies and how he was gonna show her. Now, when he'd started ranting relatively close to her and spewing the racial slurs, including somewhat coherent suggestions of her being a rape baby from a white woman and a Jap bastard, she'd started returning the favor. She set her book up and looked up at him and told him his family didn't really love him, that they locked him away in here because they hated having to take care of him, because he was too useless and stupid and ugly to be worth the trouble, cold as ice. That's when he really started flipping out and mentioned the whole show her part, and that's about when security reached him just as he started reaching for her in her chair and hauled him off. I admit now, up front, that I was told about all this when I came into work later that night by the Indian security guy up front, who'd heard about it from the front desk receptionist before she went home, and from his boys in security too. I asked around, and other people verified the details, so it seems to be true. If she can drive a World War II Pacific Theater combat vet to the point of violence, imagine all the guy effects she could make cry with one post. God, I love her. I really do.
OMG, Nurse-kun. First time I have actually seen one of your threads here. I've been reading your story from the WWII, and I have to say, man, you are a modern-day knight in shining armor. You show that despite the shit of the world, there's still an awesome glimmer of hope somewhere for the human race. It makes my heart fucking swell, man. Props to you.
I'm really not that special. I mean, it's not like I'm adopting some poor kid in Russia that I've never seen. I met her, I was exposed to her, I reacted to personal stimuli. I'd say that just makes me human, nothing more. I dare say most of B would have felt something, though just what, and how much of it, would vary depending on which particular B-tard it was, of course.
Time paradox. According to the archives at WWII, Mangled-chan was picked up by distant Japanese relatives. What do I believe? How do I know you are the real Nurse-kun?
Well, I didn't write that, but as always, I don't particularly have any evidence to prove that. Guess you'll have to trust me.
Unfortunately, we are being spam-fucked. I'm glad she stuck up for herself that way. Good for her. If I was her age, I would have punched him in the nose and started crying. Bleh.
Isn't there a rule about needing to be 18 plus to be on 4chan? I mean, maybe it's just me, but the fact that he showed up 15 minutes after class lets out in K-12 on the East Coast. Oh well. A one-limbed girl in a wheelchair still isn't a match for an 80-plus-year-old guy, unfortunately. Thankfully, he was removed before the situation got any worse, and security's been a bit tighter around her since then.
She's practicing origami. Last I heard, she was playing her old Nintendo DS to improve her coordination.
She's still playing with her DS. She's just been having some fun with the origami since I gave it to her on Monday night. Reminds me, I need to buy her more paper before I head in tonight.
May I suggest that Nurse-kun start a new thread?
What's the point? Wastes of bandwidth like that will just move into a new thread as well, in addition to irritating more neutral B-tards that see a new thread and mentally mutter to themselves about there being an infestation of them, which may drive them to becoming hostile as well. Can't win if I do, can't win if I don't. Since the mods don't give a shit about bot spam, there's really nothing I can do at all.
Get her some music. I'm dead serious. Ask her what she likes, and if it's shite, pick out something good. Something exotic that will offer her an escape from reality. Get her volumes 1 to 3 of Berserk to start with, too. That would be a perfect story for an amputee that lost their family.
I already got her an iPod for Christmas, as I've mentioned before, and it's full of various bits of music she asked me to load onto it for her. I'm not sure Berserk would be looked upon as an age-appropriate gift for her. Hell, I might be charged with corrupting a minor if I gave it to her and got caught.